Okay, welcome to this little intro to Clausewitz. I wanted to go through the basics and explain why I was building it. So essentially, the reason behind Clausewitz was I was looking at changing to Napoleonics from coming from a Warhammer background, and none of the rule sets that I looked at were suitable for what I wanted to do. Everything seemed to be brigade and upwards, whereas I wanted to model individual battalions and then fight those battalions. Because I was looking at Blucher and I think, yeah, it's a great system. I love the system. It's nothing against it. But if I wanted to, let's say, reenact the Battle of Vimeiro, model the individual battalions on that specific base for, say, let's say, Fane's battalion, and then I wanted to fight Karuna the next week, I'd have to have completely different bases because I'm that picky about what battalions are going to be appearing on that bases, and it will bug me if they were the wrong battalions on each base. So what I thought was, well, if you can't do that, can you have individual bases representing battalions and then group them together, which is kind of where Clausewitz started to form in my mind. So the basic unit in Clausewitz is still a brigade, but in this case it's made up by a number of bases which represent regiments, and another base which, if you need to, it can represent the brigade commander. So here we've got two armies. We've got the French army at the top and the British army at the bottom. These are equal forces, so they've each got one unit of cavalry, one artillery piece, and then 3 brigades, and those 3 brigades are either, well, there should be 2 brigades of 3 infantry and 1 brigade of 2 infantry. So the number of infantry in a brigade affects the morale of a unit. So a basic morale for a single base of infantry would be 7. However, the more battalions there are in a brigade, the better the morale of that unit. So for every extra, or for every base in a brigade, it would increase the morale by another point. So in this case down here, we've got 3 battalions in this brigade. So we started with 7, we add 3 for each base, that brings us up to a morale of 10. Morale is the most important factor in this game, and you win or lose by morale essentially. If your morale is wiped to 0 for a particular brigade, then that unit is removed from play. If the morale of that unit is particularly low, you'll find them particularly difficult to be effective on the battlefield. They'll probably flee more than they actually do anything. So keeping morale up is key, and you can do this by various means. Morale can be boosted by formations. So for example, if I was going to use this unit here to attack, very basic. If I was using this unit here to attack this French column, this French position up here, I would probably want to put all of these units into column formation, and by putting them into column formation, that would give each a bonus. By putting them into column formation, you get +1 morale for each base that is in column. So this started at 10, and if all 3 were in column formation, that would bring their morale up to 13. So they're attacking this position with a lot more morale. Now, morale can be damaged by enemy fire. So when an enemy, I can't even talk today. When an enemy fires on your unit, it will cause a point of damage and a point of morale damage. So this unit fires on this brigade here, and they cause 1 damage. So there's no actual effect from the damage as such at that point, but their morale would be reduced from 13 to 12. So as the game progresses, their morale would slowly degrade until they're at the point where they're going to be less effective. Now, when I talk about damage, the way damage can affect a unit is that each unit starts with a number of combat dice, depending on how big that unit is. So for every 200 men in a unit, you get 1 firing or combat dice. Now, if fire on this particular brigade resulted in 2 or more hits, then one of these stands would be reduced by 1 combat dice, and that's how the damage works. So as long as there's more than 2 damage on a unit, then this would be reduced by 1 combat dice, and their morale would be adjusted accordingly. If there was 3 damage, then you'd lose 1 combat dice, but you'd also lose 3 morale. So the morale's being more important than the combat dice, because the morale's what kind of drives you into the enemy and making sure that you don't flee. So that's the basics of the core principles of the morale. And essentially, a turn is played out. Sorry, I'm trying to do this off the hoof, so to speak. A turn is played out by each turn. Let's start that again. Each turn represents 10 minutes of battle time, and a turn is broken down into 5 actions for each unit. So each of those actions represents 2 minutes. So when a unit is activated, a unit can use all 5 actions at once and just do what it wants. However, what it won't be able to do is react to the enemy should the enemy decide to close in. What would happen there is the enemy has free reins, and your own unit will not be able to react. So you might feel the need to reserve some of your actions. But in this case, where the armies are far apart, you might say, well, I'm going to use all 5 actions just to move forwards, because you've got no threat of any enemy attacking you. So in this case, I'm going to use my 5 actions and I'm going to move towards the enemy. Now, infantry move at 2 centimeters for a march move and 3 centimeters for a quick march move. They can only quick march if they're in column, however. So if you wanted to quick march, you have to use an action to change them into column formation, and then you can use your remaining 4 actions to move 3 centimeters each time. So that would result in a 12 centimeter move for 4 actions and a change of formation. So not only would you have the benefit of the +3 morale from being in column formation, but you're able to move quicker as well. Now, what would happen when the enemy gets a bit closer is, like I say, you'd be able to reserve some of your actions. So at this point, when you're this far away from the enemy, you might say, well, I might use 2 actions to move towards the enemy, and I'm going to reserve 3 just in case the enemy do something that I don't expect. So the enemy might decide to counterattack, at which point, if they do, you can choose to use your 3 actions to fire on them to try and repel them, so on and so forth. That's the basics. Musket fire and rifle fire are fairly simple. It's basically each unit has a steady roll, and then they have a to hit fire roll, which is basically to hit. So infantry usually have a steady roll of 5+. So each unit usually has 6 firing dice. So let's get some dice down here. I think that's 6. So let's move these British up to close range. Now everything's done. Rules have been written to 1 in 5300 scale, because that roughly equates to a mile for every 30 centimeters. And essentially, muskets were not very effective in the Napoleonic period. You might see all these battles where muskets are like firing and causing loads of casualties, but you actually had to be really close for those muskets to be effective. They actually had a effective range of only about 100 yards. So basically the enemy's already up in your grill once you're able to fire on them. And what has been found, especially after analysis of the Civil War in America, was that a lot of troops were nervous about firing their weapons, would often overload them with too many muskets, or wouldn't even fire their weapons. And in that case, there was actually a case of 75% or something ridiculous like this of troops who would not actually fire their weapons effectively enough to cause damage. So this first steady roll is to represent the troops having enough courage and enough forethought to load their weapons correctly and fire them. So in this case, we'll say this British stand here is going to fire at that French stand. They've got 6 dice, let's say. So their first roll, they need 5 ups. So we roll that, and we can see that only 1 was effective. So we get rid of these ones. Let's say this is short range. So if this is short range, they can hit these on a 4+. If it was long range, it'll be 6+. So they would cause 1 damage to this particular stand, which doesn't have any effect on their combat dice, but it does have effect on the whole unit's morale. So instead of a morale of, in this case, because there's only 2 units in here, so they have a morale of 9, they would be reduced to morale 8. So fairly simple. So you want to keep your morale up. So what shall I show you next? Sorry, this is very off the hoof, and I just thought I'd just show it and try and explain it. And if I don't explain it very well, please feel free to ask me questions. I really want this to be a success, so I'd love to, hear your thoughts or any suggestions you might have for it. But yeah, just please get in contact with me and give me your thoughts. So that is the essentials of shooting. Let's move these out of the way, back down here. So, command and control. Each unit has a general, or each army has its general even, and you start with 5 awareness points at the beginning of the game. Those awareness points go up by 1 each turn. Generals can use their awareness points to activate units. So in this case, there's a unit of 3 over here that Wellesley might want to activate. So he would have to reduce his, let's do it properly. Reduce his awareness to 2 because there are 3 stands in this unit. So depending on how many stands there are, that is how many awareness points it would cost to activate that unit. So individual stands like this artillery and this cavalry would only cost 1 point. This unit in the centre with 2 infantry stands would cost 2 points, and obviously these 2 flanking units here with 3 units would cost 3 awareness points. Wellesley can only issue 1 order per turn, so in this case he's issued an order to this brigade here to activate them. That means a ADC would be placed next to Wellesley, and it would be given a order to go up to this particular unit and allow it to activate. So it would move this turn, and the next turn this unit would be activated. Now, what does that mean? Essentially, there will be a number of objectives on each battlefield, unless you're playing a reenactment of a battle. This is for a particular, in this case I'm talking about let's say just a match play game. There will be a number of objectives on the battlefield, maybe numbered 1 till 3, depending on how many there are, and the unit that has been given an order will be given a signifier to represent which objective they are tasked with taking and holding. So in this case, let's just say they've been given objective 4. That unit can then take and hold objective 4 if it's successful. If it does, it will then score victory points for that objective. If it takes another objective, it won't score any victory points. Wellesley will have to issue another order to that unit at a cost of 3 awareness points, with new orders saying you can take that objective. So you really want to be kind of managing your awareness points and making sure you've got the right unit going to the right objective. The other thing about these units is they have to have support in attacking a position, because if a infantry was to attack a position on its own, it would probably get decimated by the infantry fire, the cavalry on this flank, and the artillery on this side. So it needs its own artillery and cavalry to be effective. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty stuck. Because what would happen is there are many formations. So if a cavalry was here, this British player is thinking, well, I've got much support, so what I'm going to have to do is place all my units in square formation. Now, if he places his units in square formation, they can't move, and their shooting dice is quartered, so there's basically hardly any shooting going on, and the cavalry are holding them in position until basically the artillery have pounded them to pieces, because the artillery would now get double damage on this unit here. And then if the unit breaks and decides to go into line, that's when the cavalry can come in and just pound them out of the way. So you need to kind of make sure that any attacks are fully supported. So it's alright activating 1 unit to take a position if you think you can do it, but you're probably likely to need 2, 3 or maybe even 4 units to take one particular objective in one position. And that's the way that works. That's the bare essentials. I'll do a few more of these videos, and I will explain it hopefully a bit better than I have done this time around, but I just want to go through the basics, like the turn, what makes up a turn, the actions, everything like that. One thing I will just quickly cover is that at the start of the game, only the 2 generals are activated, and this is not an I go you go system. It's a chit draw system or a dice draw system, and much like in I think it's bolt action, I think. But essentially what would happen is there would be a red dice and a blue dice, and it would be put in a bag, and the players would draw it at random. So if it's a blue dice, the French general gets to act. If it's a red dice, the British general gets to act. So they can then activate a unit, and next turn, if they've activated a unit, they each get 1 more dice to represent that unit they've activated. So there'll be 2 blue dice and 2 red dice. So what would happen here is that, again, they'll be put in the bag, they're drawn at random. If it's a red dice, the British can choose either to activate move and act with his general first, or with the brigade that he might have activated first. If it's the French, they get the same option. And you might get 2 blue dice on the trot, you might get 2 red dice on the trot, or it might alternate. But that's kind of, I wanted to replicate the randomness of the battlefield. That time there could be all units moving at once, rather than one side moving, firing everything, and then the other side moving and firing everything. I didn't think that was a good reflection of the Napoleonic period. So this was kind of to replicate that kind of fog of war and noise of battle and everyone moving at once and everyone not really knowing what's going on. And that's why you also have 5 actions and reactions. So you might say, well, I can move with this unit, I'll move 3, and then I'm going to reserve 2 in case any of these come into contact with me and I want to react to them. That's the bare essentials. I think that's everything I want to cover, but like I say, if you have any questions, then please let me know. I'll try and do a proper video at some point of a small engagement. I'll probably just use this particular game to show a small engagement, and we'll go from there. But if you have any questions, please let me know, and I really hope you enjoy it, because I really want this to be a success, and I probably need to explain it a lot better than I have done, but hopefully I've got the essentials across, and yeah, you can see how it works. But these are the core principles, but I'll have a game next time round, and I'll show how it works. But yeah, thanks for watching, and happy wargaming.